Excellent. Welcome to the TADSummit online conference. We have a hero of mine, Simon, because he speaks his mind. And when he introduced the potato, I was like, this is like some grand anti-marketing campaign. But no, it actually is pretty cool. So with that, Simon, please.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be here. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
I'm looking at a gallery, so I wasn't sure if you can. So yeah, the Simwood potato. I'm going to take you through kind of what it is, where it came from, what we do with it, really.
Yeah.
But the moral of the story, if there is one, is don't ever write blog posts when you're hungry, because it might not pan out the way you intend. And a brief timeline of our nearly 30 odd years really is that we started as a disruptive over the top upstart. Along the way we had to invest in the past. Basically we had to put one foot into the legacy world just to climb the greasy pole and become a peer to those who were previously our suppliers. And now that legacy world is falling away, we're able to be a pure software company again, pure IP company, which is tremendous. Along the way, I took a year out in 2022 and put different leadership in. That didn't work out quite the way I intended. I was back 11 months later, but the reason for doing it was that aside from some personal challenges, was that I couldn't really see what mountain we were going to climb next. I was pretty pessimistic on this industry, pretty negative. For in a few slides' time, you'll see why. But that time out gave me a bit of perspective, bit of clarity. Came back, knew where we were going, and as the last point on this slide shows, had a disagreement with my other half that soup was food. Wrote a blog post which had lots of food related metaphors, the potato being one of them. Some of the others you're gonna meet in a minute. However, unlike 30 odd years ago, one of the benefits of having an awesome team is that I can have these crazy ideas and then things happen. So a year after I'd written a day after writing this blog post about the potato, the trademark was in progress. There was leaflets printed. The colouring in department were going full steam, and this potato metaphor that I'd used in a blog was actually no longer just a metaphor or a temporary name. And then the technical guys got involved, and a quarter later, our hitherto presence in the UK and the US expanded quite a lot, because one of the beauties of being a software only company is you can be global very easily, very very quickly. Our presence in the UK is very deep, from the fibre in the ground upwards. Our presence in the US, we're at CLEC in 21 states, but our infrastructure is relatively light over there. But the rest of the world, we could be software only and benefit from this cloud thing that everybody else has been banging on about for the last decade or more. So the depressing bit is, where are we as an industry, and where we've been. And I sat in a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and somebody threw out the figure that McKinsey estimate that this industry has committed capex of about 8 trillion in the last 10 years. Now, I couldn't substantiate that figure, but I could substantiate other figures like $300 or $400 billion a year. Or 3 to 6 trillion over 10 years becomes quite a believable figure, and that's across the industry, from fibre in the ground through to all of the G's and everything else this industry has been obsessed with for the last decade, really, or decade or more. Mm-hmm. So what have we got for that massive investment? Well, major telco revenues are down. shareholder returns are negative, with a few exceptions. Now, one of my pet peeves is that those exceptions generally
non-GAAP. Sorry. You're not going to go there, are you?
One of those exceptions generally tend to make shit up. And I was delighted to find this paper the other week, because it enabled me to mention non-GAAP and Enron in the same sentence without getting sued, because they do. And it annoys me, but this isn't a financial presentation. The point is, even those bright lights aren't that bright. In some cases, in both senses of the word. Simwood, by contrast, we're small, but over the same period, revenue's up nearly 4x, EBITDA's up 6.5 times, and got a EBITDA CAGR of about 21%. Now, that is according to generally accepted financial practice. I think our non-GAAP accounts show us we're a $2 trillion company, and actually the biggest in the world, growing at 100% a year. And that's before we add in the adjustments that some of them like, such as counting electrons as revenue and things like that. But the point is, we've always done things slightly differently. We've always been provocative. We've always done things our own way, and I don't want to say everybody else is wrong, because that would be very arrogant. But I think the industry does suffer from groupthink, and just being the stupidest guy in the room and doing things the way that seems sensible has always served me relatively well. But that's not to say there aren't challenges that affect us just as much as they've affected everybody else. The major one is, barring the excitement of COVID, minutes and SMS are moving. They're shifting massively over the top. I've spent a reasonable amount of time in Asia over the last couple of years. Well, I haven't spent a reasonable amount, but I've made a few trips to Asia over the last couple of years, and the ubiquity of WhatsApp in everything, from business workflow through to messaging, through to getting a new pillow in your hotel room, is just absolutely astounding. And so that is affecting SMS revenues. That's affecting voice revenues. Frankly, deservedly so, because the industry has done nothing to keep those users, nothing to deliver the value that they find elsewhere. But as a company whose revenue comes from this, along with others, that's obviously an alarming trend. For those that are more data focused than we are, because we are fundamentally a voice company, growth in broadband traffic effectively has essentially flatlined. Protocols are getting more and more efficient. The builds have gone on and on and on, and we've got massive overcapacity. 140 exabytes versus 11 exabytes of peak demand. Yes, there's still some plenty of not spots, but most people, and this is something you've said actually, Alan. I can remember your hobby horse a few years ago. Why do we need 5G? 4G's good enough, or was it? Why do we need 4G? 3G's good enough. I can't remember.
4G was when it was good, because it was just like fixed broadband.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty much where we are. Yes, more and more is moving to use the internet as a transport, but in a more efficient way.
Exactly.
And the demand for capacity isn't anywhere near where it was. Yes, there's some infilling to do. Yes, there's some regional catching up to do, but we're in a good place from a consumer point of view. We're not in a good place from a provider point of view that wants to spend a load of money to differentiate, because everybody's got enough. But all hope is not really lost. Voice is still the killer app, and we learned this, I think, during COVID, where we all went from like 10 video calls a day to thinking, oh Christ, I'm just going to pick up the phone, or I'm just going to get in the car and I'm going to meet somebody. It is, technology hasn't replaced voice or in person meetings at all. So it's still the largest social network on the planet, despite Meta's best efforts, and it still is the most effective means of communicating. So that's in our favor. And believe it or not, global voice spend is still rising. I'm from a very mature market in the UK. You guys are from a or at least in market terms, a mature market in the US. But in the rest of the world, things aren't nearly as progressed as they are with us. So we're still seeing reasonable growth to come in the rest of the world. UCaaS is in very, very nascent stages in other parts of the world. Yeah, it's pretty mature in the US, but you're still looking at adding 5 million odd users over the next few years. UK is similar on a smaller scale, as is the rest of Western Europe. But there's places in Southern Europe, Africa, Asia where it's all still to play for. Yeah. Which is encouraging. And where that benefits us is obviously we supply UCaaS directly, but we also supply the nuts and bolts that underpin the UCaaS operators. 80-something% of our business is the carrier services side rather than the platform side of things. So a new UCaaS operator, new CPaaS operator benefits us. And speaking of CPaaS, that's obviously projected to continue growing as well. I know you love CPaaS on this channel, so maybe we can come back to that one.
I mean, Twilio still says they're a SaaS company, so they don't even acknowledge that they're a CPaaS company, and half the other companies are aggregators. They're not even CPaaS companies. So, and so anyhow, what is CPaaS? But anyhow, you continue because you're a lot smarter than me, and I'm fascinated by this.
Well, apparently, if you're a boring old carrier and you have non-GAAP accounts, if you put CCAP in your annual reports, it's worth quite an uptick on your multiple.
Well, the funny thing is, there's one, let's call it the biggest CPaaS company that actually buries all their marketing costs in their COGS. Their actual gross margin is negative. But unless you really look hard, you won't see that.
No.
Unless you really have an experienced CFO, you won't see that. So the amount of games that are being played there is staggering.
Yeah.
But keep going, man. Keep going where you're going. This is great.
Of course, there's AI, which is in every way going to be massive. I could do a presentation on AI in our business just on its own. The difference it's making to operations, to development. I mean, I don't know if you're using an AI assistant for coding yet, Dave, or are you still all old school?
I am, yeah. I use it for coding. Definitely mixed feelings because I feel like it's making me lazier by the day, but I do use it.
It makes you lazier, but it makes you massively more productive and a lot more tired. My revelation was that actually yes, this may replace junior devs, may replace middle devs. It makes the senior devs work a lot harder and be much more productive because you can't let it loose. You've got to supervise it, and you need a grown up to make sure it doesn't just make stuff up. But that's been incredible. And for me personally, it's been brilliant to come back to being allowed to mess with things with flashing lights and shiny bits, and actually having some help to bridge the gap from the last time I was allowed to do that, and be remotely modern in my approach. So it's been brilliant. AI agents, I think are going to be huge. We haven't announced this yet. But we're adding AI agents into the Simwood stack such that you can provision them in a few sentences on any number, which I think makes accessibility much easier because it's a bit of a murky world, that one, to know where to go. And the the interesting thing in that space is the hyper verticalization is like immense. There's hundreds of companies throwing AI at particular verticals and solving particular challenges. But when you look at them, they're doing amazing things, but they're doing amazing things in a Gen Z kind of way, i.e., don't speak to anybody and do it all in a browser. So that, as I see it, there's huge opportunity for somebody like us to kind of telephony enable, those guys to bring the voice channel into their product. And the world speak two very different languages at the moment. Your traditional carrier could not solicit an AI company, and an AI company could not procure telephony services. There's just such a huge void. But there's a place in the middle, both technically and linguistically, where they can do amazing things together. And as I say, bring the world's biggest social network to their new creations. So I find that pretty exciting, and I see some quite interesting opportunities there. So there are reasons to be hopeful. There's organic progress in the market, albeit we all have to convey more minutes at lower prices to essentially stand still. But that's been the game for the last 10 years. Yeah. But we need to be more efficient. Ultimately, the last man standing will be the most efficient one. It'll probably be us. But the other guys, they need to cut costs. They need to cut bloat, and the bloat and the costs in traditional telco is just amazing. It's astounding, frankly. We have meetings with tier ones, and there's one at the moment where they signed to be a customer about a year ago. I won't name them, but they haven't onboarded a new carrier in 7 years. They've had numerous changes since, so the process doesn't exist anymore. So having to recreate the process, and that's hugely flattering for us that we're that one in 7 years. But that's not an isolated example. We've had similar things on the sales side. You'll speak to a salesperson and go through the sales process, but they haven't actually onboarded anybody in a decade. You think, well, how can you be in a sales role when you haven't onboarded anybody for a decade? It's just mind-bending.
Amazing.
But yeah, they also have these infrastructures, which is what I'll come on to, shortly, which are just not efficient, not cost-effective, and they're effectively locking their cost base into the past, but also locking their feature stack into the past. They can't justify investment to bring it up to date. So there is only really one path that leads to, and it's not a positive one. Yeah. But there's also, of course, the startups like the AI guys that I mentioned that need access to telephony. Voice, I think, is the protocol of AI. I mean, yes, between two of them, they may create their own language that's 100%, more efficient. 100%. But what better way to interface with it than your voice? So I think there's huge opportunity there. And I talk about architecture and food metaphors. You're not going to capitalize on it with sausages and spaghetti. Now, Alan and David, and possibly Dave, will know when I talk about Heinz sausages in spaghetti. Yeah. That's what I had in mind. Now, I used Grok to create this image, and he didn't quite get there, but he got close enough. Yeah. If I analogize the Simwood network to a potato, and I'll come on to why shortly, I analogize everybody else's to sausages, the sausages being the magic boxes, the SBCs and the like, joined together by bits of spaghetti. Now, our network, from a physical point of view, obviously still has fiber joining boxes in disparate locations, but architecturally it's very, very different. And the point is, if you've got a legacy network, let's call it, they would call it next generation, that has a series of sausages joined together by spaghetti. If you want to add a new feature, you need a new sausage. you need a new magic box, and you need to insert that somewhere, which means you need more spaghetti. And in fact, you don't just need one of them, you need several ones in different locations. And then you want another new feature, or a customer has a particular requirement in a certain geography. And you just end up with a tangled mess that is unmanageable. And it astonishes me in 2025, knowing what we do and knowing the way the likes of Dave, works, and the modern way of running software and running infrastructure. It astonishes me to have competitors have outages, and their sort of root cause analysis is, oh yeah, we had two SBCs and the configs were slightly different. We've ticked a few boxes and now they're the same. How you can have that in this day and age is frankly unfathomable. But when you have that approach, sausages joined together with spaghetti, it's entirely believable.
Oh, yeah. Boxes and wires is an analogy as well. It's any telco standard, it's boxes and wires.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention, Simon, as I've heard you say before, that each of those sausages has its own licensing fees and maintenance.
Oh, yeah. Sausage tax. Yeah. And a constrained feature set. It's absurd, but anyway. The other metaphor for this, which didn't fit in with the whole food thing, and I'm sure Alan, you'll have had one of these in your Granada at some stage, and I know David, you've probably still got one in the Jag, but the old CD multi-changer. I quip that other carriers talk about their next generation network. What they really mean is they used to have a legacy TDM, big physical switch network, and then they spent lots of money on magic boxes, and now they're all IP. Yay! They bought SBCs, and and media gateways before them, and media controllers alongside that, and they became IP. And I view that a little bit like, and I think everyone on this call will probably relate, when the CD came out. And we went from, admittedly, you lost the mixtape that your girlfriend made you, but you went from cassettes that got chewed up and wet and, other things happened to them, to things that were indestructible, and they were digital. We had digital music. We were in the modern age, and it felt amazing. And most carriers see that's where they are with voice. They have SBCs, voice has gone digital. But as we know with music, you couldn't run Spotify with a rack of CD players. Digital music was so much more than the recording being digital on a plastic medium. It has gone so much further, and voice is the same. But most of these guys are stuck with what I describe as transitional technology. I think the SBC is directly comparable to a CD player. When the world has gone so much further, it's no wonder that the over-the-top guys are eating carriers' lunch, frankly, because they're not constrained, they're not locked into that cost base, they're not locked into that feature set, and they're operating in 2025. As I like to think, are we? And that's where the potato is different. So a little conclusion there is the world needs the Simwood potato. Now, the potato, I have a habit. It's a little bit like our clownfish for the logo. I have a habit of coming up with kind of crazy metaphors that in hindsight actually tend to work out quite well, and it sounds very clever, but at the time there was absolutely no justification for it other than that sounds like a good idea. The potato being a good example. I was hungry when I wrote about it. The potato is actually amazing. It's pioneered by the Incas, my favorite people. I think it should be everybody's favorite people. We've had it for over 7,000 years, which I think is pretty unprecedented. More nutritious, more potassium in it than a banana. Vitamin C, fiber, completely fat-free, no cholesterol. Forget the fact it's a carb bomb. This is talking about the positives of it. Yeah. And it's credited with helping end the 18th century European famines. population booms, and some even credit it with powering the Industrial Revolution. So although it started as a metaphor in a grumpy blog post, the potato is actually incredible. Now, the Simwood potato, what the hell is it? Well, I mentioned that our network is architected very differently to others. We have 100% control of our software stack. Essentially, there's open source elements in there with our own secret source, joining them together, deployed on a fabric that now is pretty commonplace in the in the modern world, but we were fairly early adopting. So we adopted containerization in something like 2015, 2016. Yep. We had to rewrite our own network stack so that each container could talk BGP. And what that meant was that we could take components and we could literally just deploy them anywhere, be it on our own tin, be it on the cloud. We could spin up new instances in new availability zones, and they all became part of this cohesive core, effectively, which is what I call the potato. So customers of Simwood, carrier customers, for example, when they're interoperating with us, unlike other carriers where they'll say, "Oh, these are your two designated SBCs, these are your IP addresses," with us, they just send us the calls like wherever on our edge seems most appropriate. Kind of like Google. Yeah. You don't have to speak to them when you go on holiday and you want to access it from a different country. It just works. There's this amazing protocol called DNS. There's various other amazing technologies like Anycast that enable people to consume services in a dynamic way from wherever is most proximal to them, and that's how the potato works. But one crucial aspect of that in telephony is the consistency. So, as a carrier, we obviously have, it's one of the things we're renowned for. We have hundreds of fraud controls that are, applied on every single call as we switch it. We obviously have, metering for billing and things. You have controls on things like channels and whatnot. So you don't have one customer swamping the network and putting other customers out of service. They have to be globally consistent, in real time, which is why most operators with SBCs don't do it that way. They just lock customers to a single box. That single box takes care of customer A, and another box takes care of, customer B. The fact that we do that and we've achieved that at carrier scale just means so many problems just fall away. The problem I mentioned of two SBCs having different configs, we don't have that. The various containers involved in routing and switching calls, and we've got hundreds of them, in terms of hundreds of images deployed many times each. They're all consistent. Yeah, there may be local variables, but they're totally consistent. It is not possible for us to have two, I don't want to call them SBCs, let's say two nodes on the network behave differently. It's exactly the same code base. And if we deploy changes to it, as we do all day, every day, then they get rolled out around the whole network, just like any modern, software or SaaS company would. No 3-day maintenance windows to update a secure certificate, as you would have in other places. So that's really where the potato differs to your carrier, your other carrier networks. But because of that ability to be so dynamic and to do so at such scale, what we're able to do is we're able to do way more than a traditional carrier would do. Now, I said in the description that this, when you originally asked me, Alan, this might seem a little bit boring for people coming from a CPaaS world, and they're used to shiny things. They've played with Dave's stuff. You can change the world in a few lines of code. What I'm talking about here might not seem that impressive, but when I say we're talking about it at carrier scale globally, then it becomes there's more challenges involved in that. So around the potato, and if you think this lovely baked potato, we have what we analogize to layers of foil. And each layer is essentially a service wrap that's available all over the whole network on every call. And obviously there's some of those that are quite carrier specific, like encryption, transcoding, which you would be amazed how many global operators, for example, do not support encryption. Because it's an extra license on their SBC, and it's an extra pound a channel, or what have you. So they don't. So the opportunity for a software oriented provider like us just to fill in that gap and provide what personally I think is a human right is it is immense. But ditto transcoding. They won't support Gucci codecs because they cost money. It's 7-Eleven, ULAW, ALAW everywhere, or go and use somebody else. It's absurd. But other things like call recording, translation, transcription, where you're layering in some AI behind the scenes, categorization of that, and one of the things we've got a big push on at the moment is nuisance call analysis, because just like we did in fraud probably 15 years ago. We've realized that actually with a bit of data science and with an agile network, this is a problem you can solve. And with huge analysis and lots of, just continual sort of monitoring, analysis, behavioral, data sciencey type stuff within a framework that AI has helped us create in terms of scoring matrices and things. We're blocking hundreds of thousands of calls a day across the network. That equates to us taking about 4% of the traffic off the network. That's 4% of traffic that we're not going to get any revenue on, that we've spent money to not have revenue on, which is reminiscent of where we were in VoIP fraud, where we'd spend a fortune to block a call and then somebody would send it to a competitor who'd spent nothing and they'd have all the revenue. But it's the right thing to do. We're only really just scratching the surface there. That those screws can be turned a lot further, but we're into an interesting place with that now. We had meetings with our regulator last week because we're stretching some of the definitions of what they intended in the guidance, and we're at a place now where we could take 40% of the traffic off the network and most people would benefit. But actually there may be more false positives in it at that level. Is that acceptable? In the interests of blocking scams and blocking nuisance in all its forms. So that's another one that is just available there in the as a foil wrap around the core. And there's going to be loads more of these. The interesting thing is, while everybody else is focusing on updating their SBCs and adding secure certificates if they have encryption enabled and that type of thing, we're able to focus on the future because the platform is already 2025 ready. But there's more. So imagine this lovely baked potato wrapped in lots of layers of foil. What we have going into it are skewers. Each skewer really representing a protocol and a geography, shall we say. And those skewers are where traffic can go in. They're also where traffic can come out. And the key thing is that if it comes in and it goes out, it's not only going through the core, but it's also going through every service layer. And any one service layer can be turned on. And it's not just SIP. That obviously includes Teams, it includes Zoom, it includes WebRTC, it includes other protocols yet to be created. So it's perfectly feasible to say, okay, let's have a SIP call, go to Teams, let's record it, let's transcode it, and let's have an AI agent in the in the middle, or let's have a SIP call and let's have the ability to fail it over from Teams to Zoom if there's an Azure outage, that type of thing. That's the kind of capability that you start to you start to be able to achieve. So really, we're all IP, any to any, and the more recent dimension we've added in there is anywhere. That in essence is what the potato is and what we mean by it. But there's more. In the most anti-carrier kind of thing we could do, and scoffed by certain competitors before some of their customers move their entire base over to us as a result, is bring your own carrier. So in our world, we make money on, putting it crudely and simply, we make money on renting numbers, we make money on calls to those numbers from our peers, and we make money on conveying outgoing calls. So the most stupid thing we could do is open our network up so people have all of the functionality on numbers that they're renting from other people, and give them the ability to send their calls to somebody else. So that's what we've done. That's what we've done with BYOC. And that is amazing, actually. I describe it as a gateway drug, which perhaps isn't the most politically correct way of describing it, but less so in the US. But in the UK, you'll remember this, Alan, our number, because it hasn't changed probably since you were 5, our number porting process, if you can call it that, is bloody awful. And what you find is if you have let's say a big CPaaS provider that has a numbering estate with one of our peers, firstly, the porting process doesn't exist for them to move those numbers. It exists for their customers to leave them. But secondly, even if they can somehow reach commercial agreement to use it in that way, the risk, the time, and the effort involved in doing so is immense. So for us to win a big estate from a competitor, or indeed the other way around, always has this obstacle that it's going to be really hard. Well, BYOC has changed that overnight. So give you an example. A big provider to the public sector in the UK that has most of their numbering with one of our competitors wanted features in the potato that they couldn't get. Their provider doesn't provide encryption. Turns out they can't even support domain names. They just literally need 2 IP addresses. BYOC enabled them to save all of the pain of porting and move the entire base to Simwood overnight.
Wow.
And get all of those features with no disruption to their customers. Now, yes, porting that base or otherwise migrating that base is going to be economically advantageous. But technically, and from a risk point of view, BYOC is like immense for it. And I describe it as a gateway drug because that's a sale that, from our point of view, potentially wouldn't have happened because it would have been too hard, or it would have taken years to happen because they had to migrate it a diddly bit at a time. But BYOC also means we can go along to any of our peers and give them functionality that they don't have in their network. And I should also stress it's two-way. It's not just in for the numbering, but it's also out. And I'll come on to how that plays out in a little bit. So a few. Excuse me, just let me have a drink.
Oh yeah. While Simon's having that drink, I like to think of this as being the solution to carrier envy. When solution providers look over at Simwood and they get a bit envious and think, oh, they've got this that we don't. They can do it now without to port numbers and things.
So thanks, David. So a few use cases. Our place in the market, at least historically, has always been the disruptive startup. And I think if you were to do an analysis of acquisitions in the UK over the last decade, you would find that the vast majority, at least the significant ones, were all Simwood customers. Now, the interesting thing for me there, or rather the entertaining thing for me there, is that in some cases they've been purchased by our competitors to acquire critical capabilities. And you might assume that Simwood would be edged out in that scenario. However, they've been built on capabilities that we have that they don't. So we're in an unusual situation now where in more than one case, several cases, our competitors have bought our customers, and therefore our competitor is now our customer.
Yeah.
And, those are in some cases 4 or 5 years in, and they don't have the capability to move away.
Yeah.
So that's great. And actually, all joking aside, that has led to some quite interesting collaborative conversations, at least with the more mature ones that recognize actually they do some stuff better than we do, and we do some stuff better than they do. So, hey, maybe we could do some stuff together and achieve the ideal. But yeah, we continue to to major on those disruptive OTT players that need. They need APIs, they need Opus Codec, they need WebRTC, they need the ability to just do stuff in a 2025 way, rather than having to reinvent the glue and protocols they've never heard of in ways that they've never imagined to achieve what should be really, really simple.
Yeah.
And Dave will relate to this. I know with Jambones, he's plugged Jambones and Simwood and done loads of loads of demos in that way. Another one is I touched on before is kind of protocol integration. One of the things that absolutely does my head in over and above non-GAAP accounts is take Teams in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Most of the industry are selling Teams as a SIP trunk replacement. Yeah. And they're selling it in that kind of way. It's so much per seat, and you get these 3 minutes. And they are so entitled and so arrogant that they believe that the 90% of the margin that Microsoft let them have is because Microsoft are stupid. Now, you can say many things about Microsoft, but I don't think stupid is really one of them. And my take on that is Microsoft let them have that revenue and let them have that margin because a few years down the line, it's utterly irrelevant. Microsoft are busy adding the actual value for the end user that they've now acquired, that end user is going to be paying for in 10 years time. But I seem unique in seeing that, and everybody else just seems to sell Teams as a SIP trunk alternative.
Yeah.
Our view is, why don't you sell both? Why isn't Teams just another seat like SIP is a seat? And I'll give another example. A customer that has an estate of legacy PBXs that they want to move to hosted UCaaS. That's a relatively easy path.
Yeah.
But some of them want to migrate to Teams, and they viewed that as a forklift upgrade.
Oh.
We'll get rid of the SIP on a Friday and we'll put Teams in for Monday. And my view on that is, well, why don't you just do both? Why don't you just let it, a given user or a given department decide whether Teams or UCaaS is best for them? Doris on reception might quite like an old Yealink phone with a load of flashing lights to route calls. Yep. But Johnny the sales rep the sales rep in the field, Bert the sales rep in the field is probably a better choice, might prefer the Teams mobile client. Why don't you let them have both? Why does it have to be a forklift upgrade? And what that opens you up to is there's a whole load of value that can be added in there, regardless of what Microsoft do. For example, at the moment, IVR, recording, some of the AI stuff. Yes, Microsoft will chip away at that and do that as a licensable, upsell, but there's still loads of potential for operators to find value by taking the best of UCaaS, the best of Teams, the best of something else to build a solution for the customer, to add value, which I was always taught is what business is about, rather than just selling shit, which seems to be the way most people work. That also at the level we operate, that also creates interesting opportunities from a DR point of view, for example. So if you're a carrier and you sell Teams as a SIP trunk alternative, you have a number going into a magic box that delivers Teams. We have a number going into a potato that can deliver SIP, Teams, Zoom, whatever. So it's perfectly feasible to say, right, okay, at 5:00 on a Sunday, all incoming calls fail over to SIP in Tokyo, and then at 9 o'clock on a Monday they go back to Teams. Oh, Azure's down, let's send them to Zoom. And you get real flexibility there to add value and build solutions. Third one, I mentioned magic boxes, and I've said some not too nice things about legacy operators in this space. But like I say, they're locked into a cost base that is not sustainable going forwards, and they're locked into a feature set that is not going to help them be sustainable, because their customers want more, and they can get more by downloading an app on their phone. Why should they continue paying their money? So there's a simultaneous opportunity to say, Mr. Telco, let's replace your aging stack, and actually let's give you a 2025 feature set in the process, so you can add some value to your customers and you can have some relevance. And we've got numerous conversations going on with this. I'll give you an example. So an incumbent operator, they're properly interconnected in their geography for emergency services and all that kind of thing. They've got class 5 soft switch on top doing voicemail, that kind of thing. They've got a VMware stack. They've got a whole load of PBXs in the VMware stack doing stuff. They want to replace all of that with Simwood. And this is where BYOC comes in again, because BYOC enables us to replace their SBCs for the emergency services interconnects and the local traffic, the local termination. But they can fall back on Simwood for the international termination. They can use our UCAS. They can use our UCAS stack, and so on and so on. And you can replace their entire infrastructure with our service offering, all API controlled and much cheaper than they're paying at the moment. And that's pride often gets in the way, as does sunk cost. But that's a conversation we're having, in multiple places with those that are open to it. And growing up enough to recognize it. And to be honest, that wasn't one we intended. That was one that spun out of BYOC, and somebody said, well, hang on, if you've got that capability, then I could do this. Well, yeah, you can. And it's quite interesting. And from our point of view, we don't want to be a licensed operator in any more geographies than we are. Being a CLEC in the US has put us off that for life, I think. So we'll stay there. We'll stay in the UK, but we don't need licenses in Botswana or the headache of emergency services in Switzerland or whatever. But we can provide services to those that are there. And we can do so in a way where they're the licensed party, we're providing the infrastructure. And so some interesting things there. Number 4, agility. So those that don't replace their stack with us, they keep their SBCs with a single interconnect, effectively hairpinning traffic through us, and an OSS BSS integration, such that they can trigger things in our API. They can add new services to their customer base actually relatively easily. Gotcha. So the example I like to use is take a mobile operator that happens to be global, and they get a particular requirement for call recording on their mobile user base in Ecuador. How the hell are they going to do that? Well, actually, with the Potato, they could. They route some of their traffic through us. They could route all of their traffic through us, but they choose which element of the traffic has which feature enabled and when. So it would be very easy to just route that Ecuadorian mobile traffic through us and just record that particular user, or route everything through us and just turn features on particular trunks. And that extends to every service that we've got. That could equally be our nuisance call solution. One of our competitors could route all of their inbound and their outbound traffic through us, and they continue doing business in the usual way. We're just throwing away all the rubbish calls. And building the analysis on the data that we're seeing. So there's loads and loads of opportunity and capability there. It isn't necessarily a an either or, your way versus my way type type thing. Now, some are more agile than others, but the point is they only need to flex once. And then it's under software control, what features are turned on when, which is much cheaper for them to implement and manage. And the final one is geography. So I mentioned we don't want to be licensed in far-flung places, but the benefit of taking the edge global, so the edge, particularly the latency sensitive elements of the edge, so the signaling and particularly the media, are on every continent now. So we can switch calls in and out in a remote, location. Let's say, I don't know, Australia or Africa or wherever. So that's led to some interesting conversations. Give you another example there. We've got an operator like, right, okay, we're laying fiber across 7 countries. We're happy with the capex of that. We know what we're doing with fiber. It's a 40-year investment. We don't want to touch voice. Voice is horrible, but our population needs voice. So actually, we've got our edge that's pretty close in latency terms. We've got our UCAS stack. We've got our ability to give them incumbent interconnects through BYOC. So effectively, with what we've got and nothing else, we can turn them into a national voice operator in 7 countries very, very easily without them touching any infrastructure.
Wow.
But I mean, another one of my hobby horses, I might be getting onto a few of them today, but you might have seen some of the blogs, these Muppets that claim to provide service in 300 out of 194 countries. Like they're colouring in. That annoys me because they're not doing it properly. They're playing fast and loose with regulation in most cases. And, that comes back to bite somebody on the bum. And usually it's anybody but them. We have friends and customers in most parts of the world. So when a customer of ours comes to us and says, right, okay, I need numbers in Australia, we don't say, oh, yeah, we're an Australian carrier, and make up some nonsense to get the sale. We say, actually, we've got some good mates over there. Go and speak to Jay and we'll back all the traffic for you. We'll encrypt it when it lands with us in Sydney. We'll decrypt it when it pops out in London, New York, wherever, and it'll be delivered to you over your Simwood trunk exactly as if it was one of our numbers. And that's a pretty powerful story because they can get best of class in the remote location.
Exactly.
And they don't have to worry about the presentation. They don't have to worry about another interrupt. Yes, they've got a contract and they have to pay somebody other than us money, but maybe we'll sort that out at some point in the future. But it strikes me that that's the more sensible way of dealing with the requirement. And we all come across it. The enterprise, we had one the other week, got 20,000 users, 20,000 seats in the UK, and we've got one person sitting in the Isle of Man. And guess which is the blocker to the thing going ahead? It's the one in the Isle of Man where we're not licensed, But every one of us comes across that, and I think our approach to that is a more honest and sensible and safe way than the Muppets that pretend to be global until they're not.
Exactly.
So some interesting opportunities there as well. But those are just a few. But like the old humble potato, there's hundreds of ways you can cook a potato, and there's thousands of recipes involving them. And ours is the same. We're going to keep finding new use cases. I keep threatening to write a recipe book as we come across them. But it's exciting times and some really, really interesting conversations coming out of it.
Absolutely.
So I guess the question is, what are we going to cook? But this is what happens when you let Gen Z color in your slides. You end up with cheesy lines at the end.
Got cheese on the potato.
That's me. Thank you.
Excellent. That was excellent, Simon. Thank you so much. So open up any questions from the audience. I mean, first of all, the BYOC, we've seen it a number of times. more from sort of, with CPaaS, but the use cases that you've applied it to are very interesting, again, because of the architecture, your potato. So you've got the instance, and then you can basically bring in whatever service multiplexing you need. But anyway,
I think the difference is like Zendesk does BYOC because they're not a C, they're not a carrier. They don't care which carrier comes in. Bring your own carrier to the carrier so that you can take away all of their revenue is quite an unusual concept, admittedly. But I believe the world is becoming more and more decentralized. I believe it's becoming more and more kind of open and federated. And this just speaks to that. People can pick and choose which bit of our infrastructure they use.
Exactly.
It's not a monolith.
Exactly. One of the skewers, or some skewers and a little bit of oil. Dave, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's all very interesting to me. I mean, the thing that really resonated, or one thing that sort of resonates with our experience at Jambones, is just that AI guys need telco. And we have people coming to us because we're similar. I mean, Jambones is a box that wants to sit between any telephony and any AI. And the AI, it's most like a gold rush, and that people think all they need is a shovel and they're in business. So you get people coming to us that really stretch us because they need, we are bring your own carrier, but we don't have them. They come to us, where are we going to get DIDs? And then we try to help them, okay, we don't really want to run anything. We don't want to host. We don't know how to host an app. We're not a developer. Okay. So we're having to really stretch to challenge ourselves to support this sort of new brand of customers. But, you do provide a lot of value because the telephony stuff is so complicated. So that part really resonated with me. And actually, I would like to find a way to better refer customers to the Simwood, like because now increasingly people are asking us, whereas a year ago, they came with a carrier. And we're like, great. And I've always really loved Simwood's network architecture. So maybe we can do more to connect some of our customers looking for carriers with them.
And that works both ways, doesn't it? I mean, we've got some big customers that are heavily into Jambones. It's a symbiotic, world. They don't need to do everything, everything on us. Jambones adds loads of value that we don't. And
I guess the question, like if I had a question, so as you guys integrate stuff like AI agents, I'm wondering how you're finding the support. For us, it's a big, we really are challenged, and we find, okay, we're going to have to really deal with people. Now we're troubleshooting SIP and telephony where one of the parties knows nothing about SIP and telephony. So it's really challenging once you take on, hosting an AI agent and the troubleshooting and the hand-holding. I'm just wondering how you're finding that.
Yeah, so the way we're doing AI agents is that we're providing that as a service. So literally the customer chooses, and Mr. Duffett is actually demonstrating this in Florida in a couple of weeks, aren't you, David? But
right,
the customer literally configures a few things. So that the few sentences, you're a helpful customer service agent at Acme Inc. Blah 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 blah. You're cheerful, blah, etc.
Yeah.
The resources for the RAG, so half a dozen URLs for the knowledge base and whatnot, and the voice. That's it. And the demo that David will be giving, and that I've given more privately, is just setting those up, making a call, see what happens, and those sentences, as Dave, need tuning. Sometimes I wrote one that we've called Nana, which is going to be part of our nuisance call handling, which is an old lady that loves receiving calls, especially from scammers, and loves reminiscing about the 1950s. And it was really hard to get her to not just launch into talking about steam trains and things. When she answered the call, to get the balance right to coax the scammer along. But we're not yet, at least, coming across the kind of support you talk about there, Dave, because we're not at that level. Yes, we've got customers that are doing WebRTC stuff, over the top type stuff, and integrating in non-SIP kind of kind of ways. But that hasn't really been a support burden so far. I think were we doing more nuts and bolts type, AI, where they were running, the RAG and the agent themselves, and relying on protocol mediation and stuff to make them talk to each other, that might get more heavyweight for us. But we're not there yet, at least in terms of application.
Yeah, and the other question I wanted to ask you a little bit was geographies, because we talked about that. One geography we are having a lot of customers come from is the Middle East, which is really interesting to me in terms of what's going on with AI there. And we do have customers. I mean, you're more up on the regulations than me. I quite often run into customers who will say, "Hey, I want to connect to your stuff, but I'm in Ukraine, and I have to have a server in Ukraine," or something like that. Or of course, India is the one who comes up a lot. I don't know if those are places where your edge solution is something I could think about overcoming. I don't.
Yeah, we've certainly got edge in the Middle East. I can't remember India. I know that was a subject of mass debate for the reasons that you talked about. Singapore's another one like that, where you have a server there, and all of a sudden you need to be licensed, and regardless of what you're doing with it almost. We've tried to avoid the need to be licensed anywhere else. We're already licensed in half of Europe, not because we want to be, but because of the kind of providers that I talked about before, where we've given somebody a number just to help them out, and then got rug pulled by the global provider, and all of a sudden we have to be licensed there. We only choose to be licensed in the UK and the US. That's it. That's it really. Everywhere else, we want to be the infrastructure provider. And the reality is, even if we were licensed in those territories, somebody providing a service in those territories needs to be licensed as well. It's not like we're doing licensing as a service. They're the communications provider. We all need to be licensed. So they're no worse off as a result of us saying, no, we're just providing the infrastructure.
So obviously I cover the markets. A lot of our audience, believe it or not, is a lot of Wall Street guys. And that's the audience we have. That's who listens to us. We going back and forth. We had a big audience before when we were calling on markets and doing some crazy stuff. How do me and some of my Muppets get involved with some company like yours that has been around so long, clearly has a really unique position where you sit? Where are you going? Are you going to look to go public? Are you looking to get bought by a PE? Or are you just looking to hand this off to your grandkids? Or where are you going with your business, and how do Muppets get involved? I love this Muppet thing, because I'm going to call everybody I know Muppets. And Dave knows me from back in the coin card days. I'm a Muppet myself.
So I was never on Wall Street, but as you might have seen from the early slide, I was in financial markets in the UK. At a very
Same thing. You guys invented it.
That's right. I didn't like to say, but some while ago, and coming out of that market, I actually had to go through a process of unlearning, what I'd been institutionalized in. And Simwood partly represents some of that. So I can rule out PE immediately. PE doesn't suit our culture. We have, in the history of the business, only ever raised £3,000. That was from friends and family to buy our first server when we were doing the global SMS gateway, and I just didn't have the money. So as a result, the business is almost entirely owned by me and more recently staff. Every member of staff is a shareholder now. They have growth shares keyed into the success of the business. What that success looks like is has a couple of complexions. Really, we trade on, we make money, and I view, we're 30 years old now. Everything I do, I'm looking for the next 30 years. Not necessarily my kids, but internal talent, grown to take it on. I've never believed in running a business for the let's build it today and sell it in 3 years. You've got to build for the long term. We're very early to most things we do, so it tends to take 10 years for us to actually be in the right place. But so I approach it with an infinite mindset. But where an opportunity comes along that ticks the right boxes, then we're not gonna say no to it. Now we get offers probably on average at least one a month, and none of them have crossed all of the
when you say offers to acquire you, offers to partner, offers to roll up,
approaches to acquire, and none of them have ticked all of the boxes yet. Usually kind of culturally, intent for the staff, intent for the customers, intent for the platform, which frankly are more important to me than the pound, shilling, and pence in any kind of offer.
So you're looking for the right strategic partnership that can keep this business going.
If we've got
why
opportunity,
not roll up under? There's a couple of IPOs coming. Why not roll up under an IPO as a standalone part of it?
If we've got opportunity to do what we do with more impact in a more secure way, we'd be stupid not to take it, I guess, is the gist of it. But we're not looking for anything, in particular. We don't need anything.
Nobody wants to give you anything when you need it, kid. if you needed something, nobody wants to give it to you anyhow. So the reason you're not looking is the reason why I'm asking.
Yeah. So I'm sure the right opportunity will come along at the right time. But
I like finding opportunities. I like matching them together. I like trying to make things happen. I don't know. I'm just curious.
We've had conversations, and it's fair to say that some of those conversations have led to some of what's in the potato with larger operators that just cannot handle what we now do with, say, BYOC. They've got esoteric routing requirements for a particular customer. They can't do it. Yeah. So us in there would enable them to do it. We've had conversations with other ones where the conclusion, from a technical due diligence point of view is, Christ, let's throw away what they've got and save 10 million a year on license fees and use Simwood in the core. Now there's various reasons why both of those didn't go anywhere. But like I say, the right opportunity will come along at the right time. But the right opportunity for us is customers, staff, platform. And that's why I can be so transparent about this. All of our, there's no secret amongst our staff that, if Elon rings me up this afternoon and it's right, then we'd consider it. It's not something that gets announced as a fait accompli. Same with the customers. I don't want the customers worrying about what our future holds. We're here for the long term. Yeah. Even though the ownership may change.
So what Jambones does is similar to what he does, but you seem to be more dealing, because I know you're dealing with a lot of these new AI companies from like San Francisco. You're dealing with these kids that just raise money and they don't really know what they're doing. I mean, how do your two things?
Well, I don't have a network. I'm not building a network. I couldn't afford to invest in a network. So that whole side of things, I don't do and wouldn't do very well. I would say in Jambones, we compete more with like LiveKit. If we're an orchestration platform, where we're going to connect any telephony to any AI, and we'll let you run it in an air-gapped, self-hosted environment if you want. And that's the space we're in that we need to compete in and compete better in. Because people don't think of us. When they think of, LiveKit, they just think, well, there's only one of those. Increasingly, people are thinking about us. So that's kind of the space we're in. So I think we're only similar in that, we're doing similar things with AI, kind of like everybody is. But, again, we're not, there's a lot of synergy because, like I say, we got these people that do need the good network services, but they don't even know how to ask the questions. And we're just trying to get better at what we're doing. And we have to spend a lot of time knowing about. We connect to 20 speech vendors. We got to know all their APIs. We got to be able to troubleshoot when a guy says, 30 seconds into this conversation, this transcript isn't right. Why isn't right? And we got to go look at, what model did you? And we talk daily with DeepGram, with Rhyme, with all these people to try to, that's our expertise. That's where we're trying to be great at.
Usually, a lot of those ones that are free end up not working eventually. We have Carell up from Voxit over here, I don't know if you know Carell. Yeah, he's
I mean,
doing a great job, but it's hard
we've
for
been
him to
working
compete
really
with all these
close to
free
integrate
models.
he's got his own STT, which now you can use through
He's got some big customers on it.
He's got some very big customers. I don't know what's going on in France, but there's enormous outbound dialing campaigns that we have over there going on with customers. But so that's kind of our
the same
world.
thing in France. Called protests. It's just protest after protest. Although I was there once a few years ago.
What's going on in France?
Yeah, I got no protest. But no, so seriously, it's all the opportunity, because there's going to be a couple of IPOs. I mean, there's an IPO 2 days ago in the United States with a company called Newsmax, 150 million in revenue, went to a $20 billion market cap. I mean, crazy, 150 million in revenue.
Mean stock.
It's not a meme stock. It's not a meme stock at all. It's down to like 138, 12 billion right now.
Yeah.
It's not a meme stock. The market is hungry. So there's going to be a couple of IPOs. I know a couple of companies because that's what I follow. I mean, you'd be a perfect bolt on for like a division for one of these things. Again, I'm just looking to find a way to muppet my way into your pockets. Because that's what we do at Dying Kids. Otherwise, the British dog get it. The Bluey dogs. I have a 6-year-old, but no, I'm really blown away by this and by your whole presentation. If there's any way we can introduce you or help you in any way, I'm all in. I'm blown away.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really kind of you.
Blown
Thank
away.
You. And
Really,
obviously, let's.
I come from voice. I used to buy Dave switches in the 1990s.
I bet they're still working.
I actually bought his competitor, NACT, many years ago. I bought the company he used to compete with. I bought switches because I actually wanted to buy the switches to shut off my competitor because I was a calling card distributor. Then it did happen, and the company ended up going defunct. NACT, Rob. So yeah, I understand fully what you do, and I totally believe in voice. And I do believe in voice is the biggest social media platform in the world. And I think it's coming back in spades. I think our younger generation, as people say, it's text. Really not. These kids are talking.
Yeah.
They're talking a lot more. They're engaging. And some of the political environment, kids are now, I've got a young kid in school. They're now being, the whole learning and teaching of the kids now is more communicative. So I think voice is going to make a huge comeback. Huge. Not that it never went away. Not that it went anywhere. It's just from a focus standpoint. So I think what you do in voice is because it's still the number one way to communicate on the planet.
Yeah, and I think I did an interview the other week talking about what life looks like in 2030, which is a fairly depressing subject. But the one thing that comes out of that is with more AI, with more automation, with more robotics, what people crave is more humanity.
Yeah.
And, voice is that humanity.
Yep.
Be careful. What these people got to be careful what they think and what they wish for. I mean, I read an article about Bill Gates saying in 10 years, everything's going to be automated. You're not going to need people for anything until the people start crashing and smashing these robots, just like they're doing the Elon's cars for whatever reason. Don't underestimate the power of people.
Yeah.
Because we're still a planet of people.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
Yeah.
I don't buy any of that stuff, but yeah, this has been really fascinating for me. Really exciting.
Thanks so much, Simon.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.